Good morning. I am very pleased and honored to be here worshiping with you. I ran into Candace not too long ago and I realized I hadn't been to this church in a long time. So I said, I want to come. And I said, I want to come on Mother's Day weekend because I have a special message that I want to share with you around being a mother. Even though the honoring of the mother is kind of the central focus, the message has relevance for all of us today because it's really about finding meaning in the ordinary. Are we not burdened by the insignificance of our lives sometimes? The routine, the everyday, the ordinary. Whether you're a student grinding away, studying and things, is any of this going to matter? Or others, stay-home moms, every day, the routine of just care and maintenance for the family. Even for those of us who are in professions, maybe doing meaningful work as doctors or dentists or teachers or mechanics or plumbers. There's just something about the routine of the ordinary and the mundaneness of the everyday that oftentimes make us wonder, is this meaningful, right? And so I want to kind of address this issue from multiple different angles. But first and foremost, this being Mother's Day weekend, the first focus is going to be on the mothers. And I hope that this is part of a wonderful entire weekend. When it's my birthday or it's my Mother's Day, I actually milk it. And usually it's the entire weekend. It's not just one day. No, it's either the entire weekend and sometimes it's the entire week. And in case of special birthdays, like the markers, the 50s and the 60s, then it's the entire year. So I do hope that this is part of a wonderful weekend of recognizing how amazing and special our mothers are. I'm going to take one of the things that I love to do the most. For those of us who grew up within the church, we grew up hearing those familiar stories. And because of familiarity, we feel like that we know all there is to know, right? But I love to take familiar stories, especially familiar Bible stories, and kind of turn the angle a little bit and look at it from a different angle and discover yet undiscovered rich treasure troves of knowledge and of understanding and insights about who God is and what our relationship with Him can be. Right? And so this is one of those moments, and that's part of the reason why I didn't want to give you the scripture reading up in advance, because we are going to take one of the most well-known stories in the Gospels, the feeding of the 5,000, right? And look at it from a different angle and construct a story. So I'm going to kind of construct a story more by implication, interpretation, and imagination, yet plausible, quite plausible, to kind of have a glimpse and an insight about the ordinariness of our lives and the importance of the mundane and the ordinary of our lives. And so this story and this message is the story of an ordinary mom and her ordinary boy and the role that they play in an extraordinary event in the feeding of the 5,000. That's very small. I don't know if you can read it, but in case you can't, Pastor Tim, can I have the Bible? Because I can't read that. And even this Bible with my glasses is, but if you can't follow along, please open whatever access to the Bible that you have to John chapter 6, verses 5 through 13. John chapter 6, verses 5 through 13. All right. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" Now, mind you, this is right after the Sermon on the Mount. All right? And so, so Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, and he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he had already in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have one bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a little boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among us, so many? And Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Now, if it's only counting the men, you can anticipate that easily it could be 15,000. Okay, if you add the women and the children, right? At least 10,000, if not more. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So again, this is a story that is quite familiar to us. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you were to read the account of the feeding of the 5,000, you only in John's version would you hear about the little boy. The other 3 Gospels do not mention the role of the little boy. Right? And John's version is also unique from the other Gospel versions in the telling of this story, in that the primary focus is on the dilemma of how to solve, the problem of feeding all of these thousands of people. Now, indeed, feeding of the 5,000 is an extraordinary event by all measure of the word miracle. And imagine what the people must have been thinking, infinite food source, right? And back then, as it still is in most of the world, our entire existence is devoted to surviving. And eating is the most essential element of that. So imagine what the people were thinking when Jesus performed this miracle. Right? And indeed, this was the impetus for them trying to force him into declaring himself the Messiah and therefore the King. So hold this momentous event in Hollywood freeze frame. Okay, so the obvious focus of this is this amazing, extraordinary event of the feeding of the 5,000. So we'll just kind of freeze from that. But in classic Hollywood fashion, we're going to go back to earlier in the day, leading up to, and focus on these different players that make this amazing, extraordinary event possible. And I'm going to start with the little boy. So let's introduce our imaginary. We can concoct him, but there is a boy. And let's imagine this little boy living in a nondescript fishing village, one of the many that dot the shorelines of the Sea of Galilee. This little boy in the morning wakes up and hears a commotion of all the adults talking excitedly about this person named Jesus and how they're all going to go and hear him talk. There's nothing that piques the interest of a little kid when adults get excited about something. Even when they don't fully understand what it's about, they're automatically curious and excited. What he knows is that he may not know exactly what it's about, but there hasn't been this kind of excitement in the village for quite some time. And it seems that all the townspeople are heading out of town towards the Sea of Galilee. And not only the townspeople, but other people in the nearby towns all seem to be in a large crowd walking towards the sea to hear this person named Jesus. He might have been swept away by the excitement of the crowd and might have even just followed along, mesmerized by the spectacle, before he realized, oh, I better go back and tell my mom, otherwise she'll be worried and I'm gonna get it later on. So he runs back, impatient, yelling as he runs into the house and saying, Mom, I'm going to go with everybody to hear this man Jesus. And now let's introduce our second character, the mom. The mom looking up from her chores that started way before sunrise. She knows exactly what's going on. She has heard the buzz about this man, Jesus. And she's so tempted herself to put everything aside to join the crowds, to go and hear this man. But she may have a very young child who would not be able to stand being outside with too much to do. She sighs because, and her sigh is a sigh of disappointment for herself as much as it is for her little boy. And she says, I can't let you go by yourself. You're too young. But of course, for any young boy, those are the worst possible words to hear. You're too young, and therefore you're going to miss out on all the fun. So FOMO was not invented today. FOMO was inherent in every little kid who doesn't want to miss out on some fun because he or they are too young. So you can just imagine this little boy, his face crunching up into the most whining, petulant kind of expression, and saying to his mom in that dramatic, overstating way, oh, Mom, you never let me do anything. You're always treating me like a baby. Everybody else is going. Even my friend Joseph is going. Why can't I go? You can imagine some kind of a petulant outbreak like this. Well, what is a mom to do in such a case? She doesn't want to disappoint. And so she probably restrained him just long enough to grab a few things for his lunch, 5 loaves of barley and 2 small fish, and hastily wrap it in a sack of some kind and handing it to him as he is rushing and dashing out the door, trying to catch up with his friends and some people that he knows who have just passed by. She probably stood from the doorway until that bobbing little head that is so familiar to her disappears into the crowd. And maybe she saw someone she knows from the town headed that way, and she asked them to look out for him with sighs, and then turned back into her house to resume her chores, still somewhat worried if she had made the right choice in letting him go, and wondering, well, what if it rains? What if it's too hot? Oh, and she forgot to put sunscreen on him. An ordinary mom, an ordinary boy, living an ordinary life in an ordinary, nondescript fishing village along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, on the way to see an extraordinary man who's about to perform one of the biggest miracles of his ministry. Now let's go back to the setting, the broader setting of this story, and continue the story. The crowds are gathering and growing larger and larger, filling nature's amphitheater that Jesus had chosen by the Sea of Galilee. The boys follow the crowd to the place, more excited by the excitement itself than what he would hear there, because he didn't really know what it was really about. But being little, he wove in and out easily through the crowd until he made his way to the very front and plopped himself right down in front of everyone, where he could see Jesus right next to, and the disciples who were seated closest to him. He finds a nice, soft, grassy spot and settles in to hear the clear, melodious words of Jesus. And even though he doesn't quite understand all that he's saying, somehow the words come to him and seem to sink into his heart and his body, creating a warm, fuzzy feeling in the middle of his tummy. And he, like the crowd, doesn't notice the shifting position of the sun or the cool afternoon breeze that always comes in from the city. It isn't until Jesus finally, exhausted from teaching, he himself sits down to take a rest, that he, the little boy, and the rest of the crowd awakens as if from a kind of a trance or a dream, to look around, to find themselves now, later in the day, and quite hungry. The boy hears his stomach growling, and the growling sends a message to his head telling him, where is that lunch that Mom packed for me? And for the first time, he's actually thankful for those now soggy and slightly stinky 2 fishes and the loaves of bread that always seemed so plain and dull. In an instant, he might have even thought, oh no, I lost it, I forgot it. What is it with kids and lost lunches, huh? Moms will know. How many times have we driven to school to drop off that lost lunch? Right? What is it about kids? Right? But this time he was able to reclaim it. He found it in a spot nearby. And he eagerly opens it up, and he's about to plop one of those loaves of barley into his mouth when he hears again adults whispering. And again, adults whispering, piques the interest and curiosity of kids like nothing else. And he hears the disciples in the passage that we just read. Jesus telling his disciples, feed the people. And Philip replying in astonishment, 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough for everyone to have one bite of food. And then the disciples talking amongst themselves excitedly and worriedly and concernedly trying to figure out what to do. Confused, frustrated, overwhelmed. As they're trying to have these adult conversations and figure things out, they feel the tug. Andrew feels the tug of a little boy at his shoulder. And I'm sure he tried to shoo this kid away. And maybe this kid had gone to a couple of other disciples to try to get their attention as well. But he kept persisting. And finally, Andrew, perhaps out of frustration, just to permanently get rid of this annoying kid who keeps bothering him and persistently pulling at his sleeve, he looks at the boy and says, what? And the little boy, with innocent palm, looks up and says, you can have my lunch. Can you imagine that moment? Andrew, looking, shocked. This little boy saying, you can have my lunch, to solve the dilemma of the feeding of so many people. We'll come back to that. But what I really am struck by in this particular moment is the little boy. And this is more than the feeding of the 5,000. I see in this a moment, a glimpse of the true miracle of Jesus. Because the true miracle of Jesus is the transformation of our hearts. And this little boy, who doesn't even understand most of what Jesus may have said, but he encountered Jesus. And through that encounter, everything becomes so clear and so simple. He doesn't think logically through, is this going to make sense? None of that. All he knows that he has been touched. All he knows is that he has been transformed. All he knows is some undefinable feeling of just love. And out of that comes such a automatic, normal, ordinary, but quite extraordinary response. This is the true miracle that Jesus has in our lives when we come to him and when we encounter him. When we encounter Jesus, he creates the miracle of transformation in our lives. From thinking about our needs and our wants, even what's possible, what's rational, what's plausible, simply surrendering and trusting all that we have. That's it. Just simply trusting and surrendering. And this childlike faith in this action is what we see as, I think, the greatest miracle in the feeding of the 5,000. Because it is this small act from a heart of a little boy is what enables, is the critical point in the feeding of the 5,000. And so, what are the lessons for us today from this story about an ordinary boy growing up in an ordinary town with an ordinary mother who makes possible one of the biggest miracles of Jesus? So first and foremost, I want to focus on the moms and come back to this idea of the importance of the ordinary. You know, we as parents, we imagine greatness for our children. What parent doesn't want our child to be great in whatever way that, you know? And we prepare and invest so much, whether it's music lessons or academic achievements or athletics or for those moments of greatness that are so few and far between. And I think of the Olympics especially, and I think, oh, those people who spend all of their lives training for that one opportunity and one moment. And so we are often focused on the exceptional and the extraordinary. But really, the greatest challenge and gift and burden and opportunity is really in the ordinary. And it is the foundation that we lay in our children through our faithfulness in the everyday and the ordinary that prepares them for greatness, whether it's visible or known or unknown in this small act of sacrifice and of giving. And so, mothers, I want to tell you, in those moments when you wonder, does any of this matter? Especially when it seems so routine, know that it matters. It matters. Your work, your sacrifice, your love, and your care for your family in all the ways, whether you're working in a very demanding career or whether you're a stay-at-home mom or whatever the role and function that you are. As a mother, the things that we do and the burdens that we carry and the love and the care that we have for our children lays the foundation for the greatness of our children, as it was for this mother. If it hadn't been for her simple, ordinary care of packing a lunch and giving it to her son before he dashed out, again, this miracle, at least in this form, would not have happened. I also want to add, for all of us, the importance of the ordinary. Not just mothers, but for all of us. What we do in the everyday ordinary when no one is looking. I love this. The size of your audience doesn't matter. It's the faithfulness in the ordinary. It's your work ethic. It's making your bed in the morning if you're a child. It's the whatever it is, the structure, the routine, the faithfulness in whatever task and responsibility that we are given at every stage of our lives. It is the faithfulness in the everyday ordinary that lays the foundation for our character, then that prepares us and enables us to act in ways that might lead to more visible acts and opportunities of the extraordinary. It is especially, I want to emphasize, again, in the story of the little boy, the thoughtfulness. Parents and adults who care for our children, and even for children and young adults as you grow, there is such a shortage of kindness. There is such a shortage of kindness and thoughtfulness in this world. We have become a mindless society. We have become a me-first society. Me, what I want, when I want, however I want it, at all cost. We have become such a mindless, thoughtless society. And I see this. I've been teaching for 35 years, 30 of those years at USC. And so I can see that there's been changes in students. And it's kind of interesting. I think I'm going to retire when I reach that point where, like, not because I'm going to be too old, but it may be like, you know what, I can't stand these students anymore. We see the sense of entitlement combined with fragility, lack of care, real concern, and overreactiveness. I can go on and on. But they're still so precious, and there's still such potential, and they are our future. But I really want to encourage all of us, especially young adults, to be thoughtful, to be kind. These are the qualities that are in short supply. And I will tell you, if for young adults, and married adults may already know this, But there was a cross-national study asking married people what were the most valuable quality and characteristic that they treasure in their relationship and in their partner. And guess what number one was? Kindness. In this everyday, ordinary aspects of our lives, just being kind and thoughtful, considerate of others. Those are the things that make the difference, make our ordinary days extraordinary. In my own life as a parent, I've been to a lot of, I have two sons, and I've been to a lot of parent-child, conferences as parents do. But one in particular, none of them really stand out, honestly, because, whatever. I'm not a tiger mom or a dragon mom. In fact, I'm the ones pulling my kids out of school to go on road trips and things like that. So, because I think, as much as I value in the role of education, there are other things that are equally important, as if not more important. But one particular parent-child conference stands out, and it was with my younger boy, and I can't quite remember. Maybe it was kindergarten. I think it was kindergarten or first grade. He went to a small Episcopal private school. And I remember, the teacher going over his record, and, that was fine, But she said at the end, she says, I want to tell you, though, that I want to tell you a story about your son, Joshua. And she said that there was a priest from Haiti who was visiting the school at the time, and he was fairly a young priest, maybe like Pastor Tim, and so he was running around and playing soccer with the kids in the playground during recess. And towards the end of the recess, someone brought out popsicles, and it was a hot day, and everyone was hot. You know how it is when you get those popsicles. And one of those, artificial fruit-flavored ones where you break apart. And so all the kids got one. And then my son, she said, was about to crunch into one of those, and then he stopped, and then he broke it into half, and then he went up to the priest and offered it, saying, would you like one? And so the teacher just happened to see this particular scene, and when she told me that story, and even now, it moves me. It moves me. Because that's the kind of child that I want to raise. And I think I did. He was very thoughtful. Anyone who knows my son Joshua would know the kind of care and the heart. But that's the kind of character. That's the kind of person we want. That's the kind of person we want you to be. And as parents and as adults, this is the kind of child that we want to raise. More than SATs and more than getting into IVs and more than whatever accomplishments that we imagine, we want them to be ordinary people who can do extraordinary things when we surrender all to Jesus. Mrs. White clearly indicates the ministry begins in the home, and the greatest test of our faith is how we conduct ourselves in the home. Right? And the greatest witness that we can bear is to each other in a happy, loving home where we reflect the true nature of the Godhead. So we know very little about the boy who brought the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes to Jesus. We know even less about his mother, other than to know that she packed that lunch for him. But the impact of that mother and that child, what they did is felt by thousands and talked about down through the ages. Never underestimate the power of an ordinary mom or a dad who raises a child to know Jesus, who can then be used by Jesus to bless thousands. There's a lesson that is applicable to all of us, no matter whether we are young or old or parent or child. We often struggle to find meaning and significance in the ordinariness of our lives, the routine and the mundane, and we might even be discouraged by our own insignificance and the drudgery of the everyday, the eating the lumpy barley breads and the soggy fishes of our lives. But Jesus is waiting in the everyday, in the ordinary, for us to meet him, for us to encounter him, for us to surrender our all, however humble and significant. Who knows what he can do to turn your 5 loaves and 2 fishes into a miracle and a blessing, because in the hands of Jesus, our leftovers become a source of blessing for others. Jesus is waiting for all of us. He is wanting and eagerly wanting to make our lives extraordinary. Let us surrender to him and wait with hope to see what he will do. This is the word of the Lord.